Hello and welcome to the Reaction News. Ta-da! I haven't done one of these things for a while, so it's appropriate that I come back to talk about the PlayStation 4 event. Let me repeat that, PlayStation 4. Holy shit! This has been 7 years in the making. I mean, technically. But, I mean, for real. For 2 years, they've been just talking nonstop. Well, like, when's the next-gen systems coming out? For sure, this E3, etc., and finally we get it. And developers can finally be like, remember that game that we were developing? We said PS3, we're kind of, like, shady on it? Well, it was PS4, and I'm sure they're 720 and whatever. So let's just let's break it down here. So of course they talked about their history a little bit and like the future, and they used all kinds of buzzwords like Genesis and Revolution, and then they passed the scroll on to Mike Cerny, and he was all like, yeah, we got all these specs in here and 8 gigs of RAM and some other stuff that I had no idea about, but looked it up on the PC forum, and it seems like that would be a really good PC. So, I mean, that's good. The PS4 is a really good PC, as well as it should be because of all the functionality in it. They showed off the controller, and there's a share button on there as well as the touchpad. So the touchpad can obviously have some kind of touch functionality, as well as using it for a browser and stuff like that. That's what I would think would be a good use for it as well. And then as for everything else, like the share button, being able to share videos that you're doing or going on to other people's friend accounts and seeing what they're playing, comment and stuff. Basically, this talked about just making everything more integrated. And then when they switched over to Gaikai kind of talked about the Gaikai guy. He kind of talked about wouldn't it be cool if we could play PS1, 2, 3, and portable games on, streaming through the cloud? Obviously, I think this is something that will be coming, but he couldn't say that outright. I think it's one of those things that they go down the line maybe a year after launch and be like, hey, it's working now. I mean, seeing as the Vita couldn't play PS1 games at first until like months afterwards, trying to keep it fresh, I suppose, if they want to roll something out later down the line. And I'm sure it takes a long time to load up all those games on the cloud, so yeah. And speaking of the cloud, they didn't really talk about the service at all, like will your service carry over? I mean, imagine it will. Is it going to be paid though? There's a lot of stuff they didn't really talk about. Price, they didn't show the console, it's the controller. I'm fine with that. They can't shoot their load right away. But anyway, so they got through all that stuff, the jargon, stuff to come. And I should say real quick, I forgot to mention that Mike Cerny talked about his game, Knack, which looks like a nice neat little platformer. I mean, he had a hand in some of the other good platformers like Ratchet and Crash Bandicoot, of course. So, of course, he's going to talk about his new thing. But moving on to another game that looked pretty sweet was, of course, Killzone 4, but they don't call it 4. It was Killzone Shadowfall. I thought they had a really good demo. It looked really good. Now, I think it'll look a little bit better in person instead of streaming via the internet, but I mean, it was a step up definitely from what the PS3 and Xbox 360 can do, but not, just really good. I think once you sit down and play it and maybe a little better, you gotta remember this is the launch window for games, so it's not gonna have all the technical prowess. So, but either way, it still looked good, as well as the Drive Club. No, I'm not going to talk about Drive Club. It's stupid. Racing cars. You like that stuff? Go nuts, because the guy on stage was freaking having an orgasm. The thing that I had an orgasm about was Sucker Punch coming out and being all some dramatic speech and whatnot, and then basically announcing Infamous Second Son, which I don't think is a reference to like Cole's brother or anything like that. I think it's just a reference to just kind of the political movement of, oh, it's, our nation's second son and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm guessing that maybe it'll be co-op too, because they talked about everyone having powers, or some people having powers. Either way, I am stoked for that game out of this entire launch lineup. Now moving on, We had Jonathan Blow when he talked about his new game, The Witness, and it was cool to see it, and it was very bright and colorful. Very cool, kind of looked a little bit complicated. Not as cool as I thought that his original game, Braid, was, but yeah, I haven't touched it, so I can't really say too much on that. Then we had David Cage come out and talk about Quantum Dream, polygons and pixels and bullshit, and they didn't show a game, and he was just, he's just a talker, and I understand that, so whatever. Then Media Molecule, who I love for Little Big Planet and stuff, they came out and they're like, oh, the move is so cool, and I just screamed. I was like, no, that just confirms that the move is going to be compatible with the PS4, which is very sad to me because I just want that thing to die. Not that I hate it, I mean, I actually used it, and the dancing with it and some of the shooters is cool and a gimmick, but no, just no Media Molecule, no. And then they rolled out the third-party support with, firstly, Capcom, and Yoshinaro Ono talked about Deep Down, which was weird because I thought for sure, they said a new IP, and I thought for sure it would be, a sequel to Dragon's Dogma, given the fact that it's a fantasy game, and they really don't use fantasy games that much. So it's weird they branded it differently. Of course, this is a working title, but it did look very good. This is probably the best looking game of the bunch. I mean, technically, if it was a real demo, I should say, just, looked gorgeous. Then we have good old Square Enix. Oh, don't we love Square Enix? Don't we love that Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer and the Final Fantasy 13 trailer all coming out for launch? Oh, we sure did love that, didn't we? No, we did not, because that was not present. Yeah, they showed Agnes Philosophy again, and it was the exact same thing they showed during the summer, I believe, is when it premiered, or August, something like that, or way earlier in the year of 2012. Still cool, and they're like, yeah, it's running on PS4, and cool, but it was still a CG, it was not CG, it was still not playable. No one was playing something, it looked scripted, no one was moving or whatever. It was the exact same thing we've seen before, so whatever. And then we had the president of Square Enix come and be like, really bad English, which kudos to them, kudos to them for trying to speak English, very good, but sometimes you gotta just say hello and then bring out your interpreter, because the president I didn't understand anything he said. I thought he said something about Final Fantasy, and I believe he said that there will be a Final Fantasy out for the PS4 by the end of this year, which could be anything. He could have just said Final Fantasy at the end of this year, and I'm guessing that it's probably going to be the 10 HD remake, which he also talked about a couple days ago, and you can also play it on the PS4? I don't know. Just a bait and switch, and he just kind of ran off. He was literally on stage for half a minute, if that. But yeah, no Kingdom Hearts 3, no verses. But of course, we gotta look forward to E3. Then we saw another demo of Watch Dogs. Looked very good. I'm glad we saw a different demo than we did at E3, otherwise I would have been pissed. Again, looks good, very cool. Now, I said that Sony could win this thing if they had a good presentation, they showed a lot of good games and whatnot, and then they did the Apple thing where they're like, one more thing, stuff like that. That always gets people riled up, especially if they have really cool stuff. And Nintendo was kind of infamous for that sometimes, but sometimes they don't go that well. Anyway, Blizzard came out and was like, fucking Diablo 3, PS3, PS4, boom. And I thought that was a huge win because Blizzard's huge. No ifs, ands, or buts it. Diablo 3 had very mixed thoughts from the Diablo playing crowd. But love it or hate it, it's a big one for consoles, and I think it could really work for consoles. He seemed pretty enthused about it, and that's very good. And then Activision came out, which they're virtually the same company, basically, and then they're like, Destiny will be on the PS4, which we already knew because of documents, stuff like that, but it was nice to see, a presence there, and Bungie be like, Now we're finally on a Sony console. We really like that, and I'm sure there's money handed around. But I just it was a good end to the press conference, and just to wrap myself up here, I thought it was just a very good showing. A lot of complaints about not that many new things were shown, and it was felt like very reserved. But you know what? It was better than having like a half an hour of just talking specs, and then, hey, this is the controller and the console. We'll talk more at E3. No, they gave a pretty good indication of what the console is capable of. Not everything, obviously, not price, not all the specs and whatnot, but they did a very good job of teasing. They showed a lot of boob and probably some pubic hair. That's how much they teased us. I mean, they didn't show the full body. If we're talking about women's specs here, but they showed a lot, enough to get us aroused enough to fit us over to E3. This is not making any sense, I know, but I just thought it was a good press conference, and I'm looking forward to E3. And yeah.
One master, one king, and his name is gaming. Forever may he reign. Boom, ba-jack, boom, boom, ba-jack, boom, ba-jack, boom, boom, ba-jack, boom, ba-jack, boom, boom, ba-jack, boom, ba-jack, boom, boom, subscribe, boom, ba-jack, boom, boom, ba-jack, boom, ba-jack, boom.